If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so that any such person filming or photographing may be made aware. Yes. For participants in the room, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to contribute. When invited to speak, please press the button on the right of the microphone unit, as I didn't do, and speak directly towards the microphone. Please remember to turn your microphone off once you've finished speaking. Please also ensure that mobile phones, laptops and other devices are turned to silent. Yes. For participants in attendance remotely, can I request that you use the raise hand feature within the system if you wish to contribute and to introduce yourself when called upon. Please note that only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. Okay, apologies for absence have been received from committee members Councillor Roger Phillips and Councillor Bruce Baker. And I understand Councillor Dave Davis is present as the name substitute for Councillor Roger Phillips, and Councillor Robert Highfield is present as the name substitute for Councillor Bruce Baker. Thank you, councillors, for stepping up and joining us today. You're very, very, very welcome. Do any members wish to declare any interests in any agenda item? Nope, thank you. Right, minutes. The minutes of the document document of the meeting held on 15th of January 2025 is included in the agenda at pages 13 to 19. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you all content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Thank you. Well, lovely. We'll do those at the end of the meeting. Questions from members of the public? The committee has received one question from a member of the public, and a response to the question has been published in Supplement 3 to the agenda. The question has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or to join the meeting to ask their supplementary question. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if any supplementary questions are to be asked?
Yes, Chair. One written supplementary question has been received from Mrs. Morietska. I will display and read out the written question in a moment. Okay. So the following supplementary question has been received from Mrs. Morietska. On the 5th of March, the Council reallocated £1 million of active travel measures funding to the Hereford Transport Hub. The HCCTP 2015 business case stated that as well as the City Link Road, the project would improve the public realm and walking and cycling links between the historic city centre, the ESG area, the railway station, consistent with improving health outcomes by encouraging and enabling physical activity. These remain undelivered 10 years on. The remit of the Connected Community Scrutiny Committee includes scrutiny of development investment plans for Hereford City. Why has the active travel funding not been reallocated to deliver the safe walking and cycling measures from the station to the city centre as originally agreed in the HCCTP full business case, or to any other long-awaited cycling infrastructure across Hereford? And how was the funding reallocation prioritised against other active travel schemes?
I think the scrutiny officer is going to provide a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the response is as follows. Many thanks for your suggested questions concerning investment plans for Hereford City Centre. The committee plans to scrutinise the Council's work to deliver the Hereford City Master Plan this year. It had planned to do so at this meeting, but will now do so later in the year, the date yet to be agreed. The committee will include your questions as part of its preparations to bring this matter to the committee.
Thank you. Questions from councillors? No questions have been received from councillors on this occasion. We now move to item 7 on the agenda, highways winter maintenance. And the purpose of this is to provide a review of the winter maintenance of highways following the 24-25 winter period, endorsing or otherwise the current arrangements and providing recommendations to the Cabinet Member for Roads and Regulatory Services ahead of the 25-26 winter season. I'm delighted to have Ed Bradford and Bruce Evans here today, and they have a report that I think they're going to present to the committee. Thank you, Ed.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Scrutiny Committee, for the opportunity to come and see you this morning and discuss this item, and thanks to members who came to the depot. I think it was the 20th of February that several of you came down and had a chance to have a little tour around and have a discussion with us, so you sort of increased your knowledge and understanding of how things work. So we have got some slides this morning just to recap on a few issues, so everybody's up to speed. Obviously, the purpose of the report, the chair's just gone through that. There are several recommendations that we put forward this morning to you for your consideration. In terms of why we provide a winter service, just wanted to touch on that. So we're responsible for the management and maintenance of almost 2,100 miles of public highway across the county. Under the Highways Act, so Section 41, 1A of the Highways Act 1980, we have a duty to ensure, as far as is reasonably practicable, the safe passage along the highway is not endangered by snow or ice. And then also we have a duty to help remove where we've got snow, accumulations of snow on the highway as well. So and clearing that and maintaining access and safety. We also have a duty under the Traffic Management Act as well, 2004, in terms of making sure that traffic can move freely and quickly on the road network. In the report under Section 6, talks about how we provide a winter maintenance service and how we work basically under the well-managed highway infrastructure code of practice in terms of winter maintenance. And then also we work within the guide that's provided by the National Winter Service Research Group as well. So effectively we're consistent with other authorities across the country. So it's not something that we just make up our own rules here in Herefordshire about what we do, when we do it, how we do it. We very much follow the national standards and guides to make sure that you do have that consistency. So when you're driving around within the county, but also when you cross borders and you go elsewhere, the networks are treated in a similar way. So we do have a few slides, as I said, just to work through this morning, just to give you that general overview and the opportunity for those of you who couldn't make it to the depot. So it will be brief. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. You'll be pleased to know, and then we'll be happy to take any questions after that. So myself and Bruce will lead through. So maybe if Henry or whoever is driving can move to the next slide. So in terms of resources, there's quite a few staff get involved with winter. These aren't necessarily staff who we just take on for the winter season. They wear two hats, so day to day they will do a job out there through Balfour Beatty for us on the network. So they might be operatives filling potholes, they might be staff in the office doing that day to day role. But when it comes to winter, for the winter season, they will fulfil a variety of functions. So from driving the gritters that you see out there on the network to making the decisions or verifying those decisions. And then also we have additional resources that we call on when we need to. So we have a network of snow contractors. So they're generally farmers, other people who have access to their own kit that can come and help us in times of need. In terms of fleet and equipment, we've got 17 dedicated gritters. So they're all ones that we own as an authority. And then there is a demountable chassis as well that we've got. So day to day during the sort of the summer months, that's used as the jet patcher that you might have seen on sort of the rural roads. There's some dedicated snow blowers, some quad bikes that we got turbo spreaders, and also tractor mounted kit. So if we just move on to the next slide, you'll see some nice pictures of that kit. So we got some nice new shiny gritters. So we've had several, well certainly the last two of our order arrived a couple of weeks ago. So they've got nice 25 plates on them now. So that's my first spot of the season with a 25 plate, which is a personal highlight. Yeah, those are the other bits of kit that we've got. The snow blowers date back quite a bit of time. They rarely get used, but they're pieces of kit that we acquired and are obviously quite valuable if we ever get into the conditions that you can see on the photograph. Hopefully we don't get to that point, but we've got that kit in case we need it. If we just move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of how we run, how we work, we've obviously got routes around the county that you might have seen when you've been out and about, where you live. You might see the gritters coming past your house. We split the county up into 3 domains, so north, south, east and southwest. Obviously the county, as you know, is quite big geographically. It has quite diverse sort of weather conditions. It can be different, down in Ross as to up in Kington. So that's why the county is split into 3 domains, and that's for decision-making purposes. We have 15 priority gritting routes, so we treat probably about a third of the network there in terms of the priority gritting routes, and then that's backed up with 25 secondary routes where we treat a further 677 kilometres. And then also we'll go out and we'll treat designated locations, so in the city centre and the market towns, footways and cycleways, as you've probably seen or would expect. And then we do have cross-boundary agreements with surrounding counties, so Powys, Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Shropshire, and Monmouthshire as well. So we agree what parts of the network we will go and do. We cross over. Obviously, it's trying to find a point where it's suitable for us to turn round on a route. So we don't just hit the border and then stop gritting. We carry on to a suitable point, and equally they will stray over into our county to do likewise for us. Obviously, the national highways look after their network, so they will treat the 49 and other parts and the M50 and things like that within the county. We got 2 depots, so Thorn depot down at Rotherwas, and then Kingsland, where we got a salt storage facility at each. We can store 6,200 tonnes of salt that keeps us going over the winter period. We will top up that facility, and Bruce will talk about that a bit later, but I think we try and keep that at about 75%. So we've always got that resilience as we go into or go through a winter period, so we don't end up in a situation where we might run out. And then decision making, that's handled. We have access to weather forecasting facilities for winter through MetDesk. So that's a contract that we've got with them for a 4-year period. And they draw on data from the county weather stations. We've got 7 weather stations across the network that we can get data from. All of the decisions we record in a system called Visala. We have to have those decisions. We have that, in case anybody makes any claims, there's any sort of question mark about when we went out, what we did, what treatment we did on the network at the time, where we went. So that's all recorded, so we've got that behind the scenes. And effectively, the decisions are made by a team at Balfour Beatty. They've got a team of decision makers. They will make that call every day when the forecast comes in about what will happen and what treatment needs to be put down on the network. That's in line with our winter service plan, and then ultimately that's approved by a verification officer within that team. So there's 2 people who look at it, look at the forecast data coming in and decide whether we should go out, and then if we do go out, what we should do. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So just a few graphs here. There's more detail online on the council's website in terms of where we actually go. So you've got the routes there that we talked about, the priority routes on the left. Secondary routes then come in, and then the snow contractors are divided up into zones, into areas. Some of them will have more than one. Some will just have the one that they cover in time of need, and we will ring them up and ask them if they can deploy. So it's not a case of them just deploying when they want and then sending us the bill. We're in control of that arrangement and saying, yes, please, can you go out and help us? And equally, if somebody can't on that particular day, then we can always ask the neighbouring contractor. Next slide, please. So I'll hand over to Bruce, who can talk through sort of the operations side of things and the decision-making process. Thank you.
Morning, councillors. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. So the operational side, I suppose, before we even start, there's a lot of information that's being gathered. You've got the forecast through the news. You've got the eyes and ears on the ground of people going around, the condition of the network. When in winter, typically, we've got a lot of rainfall, floods that run off onto the highway. We've all seen the network where we've got floods, water. Obviously, water and ice don't mix and causes problems on the network. We've got, with the MetDesk, just a bit off this operations model, we get a forecast at 7 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock at night. From that informs through the day what the teams will do. So the main decision making is around 12 o'clock, but there's a lot of information that feeds into that. We've got 3 decision makers. They take it in turns. They're on a rota, same as the drivers. And in that, there's one who's well experienced, who's a verification officer. Basically, it's bounced off what the decision is, what the condition of the network is, and what's the appropriate treatment. It's not just a case of we go out, it's what the treatment is, the time of it, and the spread of salt, whether it's 8 grams, 15 grams, or if there's snow forecast, it could be back-to-back treatment throughout, so 24/7. Once the decision's been made, the supervisors go through and cascade all the information out to the drivers, the loaders, the depots, mobilises all the teams to get ready to do the treatment. They load the salt ready to go. Normal winter, normal day, probably they'll be out about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, but it could vary any time of the day going out. So in that, they've got to load up, prepare, go out, treat the routes, return to the depot. In that, there's a process of weighing in, so weighing in the salt, making sure they've got the appropriate measures of salt to treat. But on coming back, there's obviously filling in the formwork, but also there's also the wash down, making sure the fleet, because of treatment salt and obviously the deterioration wear on the forecast on the plant is basically washed off, so it doesn't seize up. One of the risks is that the spread at the end of the gritter will seize and doesn't spread when they're driving through. There's sensors on the vehicles that will tell you if that's happening, but it is that maintenance that needs to happen. We then record the data. Recording's high priority because obviously there's things that come through with obviously management of the salt, but also there could be claims coming through which we need accurate data of what we've done, when we did it and why we did it. And that's really where we come into the Visala to record the appropriate decision making. Can we go on to the next slide, please? This is just an introductory slide. On the left-hand side is what we get from MetDesk. We get basically the temperatures and highlighting in red what is a warning, a hazard that we need to treat. I'll go into a bit more detail on that on the next slide, but the one below it is the graphs we get on each of our 7 stations. And in that it's what the dew temperature is, which is what the moisture temperature are called, what the temperature of the surface, the below surface, what the air temperature is. You've got the wind, you've got the surface condition, which is it wet, dry, is it treated, semi-treated? That supports what we do, whether it's 8 grams or 15 grams. And on the right-hand side of it, the graph split into 2. You've got the dotted line and you've got the solid line. The solid line is really what's happened. The dotted line is the forecast. So we can see what's happening and what's proposed through the night and where it's going to dip below freezing, what time, whether it's going to be dew temperature is going to go above the surface temperature, which then indicates we're going to get hoar frost. Hoar frost is where we get sort of the white frost, which then becomes the hazard, more of a hazard than anything else, because it's slippy, icy and needs to be treated.
Bruce, just in case anybody isn't aware, could you just explain what the 7 stations are? Because people watching online might not know. And
Yep, across the county, I don't think we've got a slide on it, but we got 7 weather stations across there. If you could go a couple of slides down, there's a camera wall. Next one. Next one. Next one. Sorry, go again. On these stations, at these locations, these aren't all ours. What we've got with the network, we've got trunk roads, which we've got access to, and our neighbouring authorities. So we're sharing data, so it's all about information. On these weather stations, we've got cameras, so we can see what's happening on the ground. Generally, it comes into its own when we've got snow. We can see what's down, we can see when it's down, and we can see how our treatment's working. So when it starts clearing, going back to black, we can see what's happening and we can get a good feel of what we need to do, whether it's continuous back-to-back treatment or whether we can ease off and then start going on to secondaries. At each of these stations, there's a number of sensors. So we've got a flagpole, which gives you the camera. We've also got, it's like a little turbine on top, where we get the wind speed. We then got the station, which gathers all the information, a box, and then we got the sensors that come out into the road, which obviously gets the surface temperature, deep temperature, which obviously the ground below, which is about a foot below, and then we also get the air temperatures as well. So there's a lot of data being captured at these sites. They are isolated in very small areas, but they're scattered across the county at key locations that we can, various heights that feed into really what the weather forecaster provides for us. In those stations, we're split into 3 domains for forecasting purposes. these are evenly split across the county. They're not in the highest locations where we get a skew on what we need to do. They're not in the warmest temperatures. They're going back in 2000, we had them thermal mapped, the county, and it's basically these were the recommendations of where they're optimising, really getting the proper forecast that would help us treat the whole county rather than isolated areas. Sorry, can we go back to where I was? Sorry,
Thank you. I
Councillor.
thought the context was important. Thank you.
Yeah, no, hopefully that covered what the stations do. So just going back to the forecasting. So in that, as I say, we got the decision makers. They're 24/7. Generally, on a good winter day, they're finished at 12 o'clock. They've made a decision, no treatment, or we go out at 2 o'clock, a normal business as usual. As it happens with any time in winter, the weather's unpredictable. That's manned, monitored in case of any changes. We've also got on call with MetDesk is the forecaster we can call on, and they can call us of any change in condition or any concerns on the network. In a normal business as usual, it's not a problem. When it comes down to when we get into severe weather, where we get to snow, where we get to long periods of ice, it pays dividends to have that forecaster, to have these guys monitoring it. What we end up doing, or the team do, is basically monitor overnight at times to make sure there's no significant change. They're very conscientious. They do it not just for making sure the decision's right, but in treating, but also when we don't treat, because it is a finite forecast. It does dip low, and that's the worst thing can happen. If you make a decision, you just need to monitor just to make sure if it's right on the line of cusp of going below zero, they're concerned, so they'll watch it, monitor it, talk to the forecaster, and if it's that close, whether or not they go out or not. If they need to, they will go out, they will mobilise, and they will treat. But generally, there's a forecast, the guys get mobilised in normal with plenty of time, and go out and plan, programme approach to doing the treatments. If there is a change, there is an hour mobilisation, and the planned treatments are for 4 hours from start to finish. That's for the guys to go out. It's usually a route 2.5 hours, but that's getting there, doing the treatments, coming back, washing down, and finishing what they need to do, and then go into the next day's programme. Can you go to the next one, Henry, please? I don't know if you can read this one, but trying to go through it. Sorry. Yeah. So in this, we've got the weather type. We've got whether it's all frost or not. It's got in there about snow, ice. What are the risks? So it's highlighted in red what the risks are and what the treatment with the road conditions like, whether it's wet, what the temperature's like. It's a starting point. We then interrogate the forecast graphs, and that really, in this one, we would go out and treat and be finished by 9 o'clock. That's when it's forecast to go below. The salt stand is starting to work and be there for the duration. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is where we go to national standards as well as our own. On the left-hand side, we've got the different types of what's happening out on the network, what's the roads like, whether it's frost, snow, ice formed, and then on the right-hand side is a standard treatment. We've got a good fleet, so in that it's what we would need to do to try and treat that. The general normal treatment's 8 grams per metre squared. 15 grams if it goes below -3. If it goes below -5, it's double treatments. Snow, we're into 15 grams, and then potentially heavy snow is back to back until we get the roads recovered. Again, it's about recovery of the roads, making it safe for the travelling public. Schools, the economy, all those things, people get into hospitals, all those things that are priority for people to get to where they need to be. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the 2 to 5 day summary. So what we've got is we've got a 24-hour detailed summary of what's going on. That's the one with the hazards. This is sort of giving you a foresight on the indication, which is basically showing this one as what we expect. It's a bit more like touch because weather forecast is a bit more difficult over longer periods, but it does give you an indication what the minus temperature is going to be and when it's going to hit. The other one is 24 hours. We're looking into possibly 36 hours, where that's gives the teams better time to plan, program. This is 2 to 5 days. It's giving you that highlight of what's happening in the future, what we need to do. There's a longer forecast as well, and then we also try and look and see what's the longer forecast around with the forecaster for MetDesk, and in that is what we do with the salt bonds, how we stock them, the amount of stock we have. Obviously, we don't need to have full bonds towards the end in April. We can run that down, but we still need to be aware of what the risks are on the network and make sure that we've got sufficient resources to deal with what we need to. Next one, Henry. This is again, just from the first slide, these are just really the summary of each stations of what the temperatures are doing. As I say, this is where the red line is 0. This is what's happening below 0. This is where we need to do precautionary grits just to make sure that the roads are free of ice as best we can. Can you go to the next one, Henry? The camera wall we just spoke about, but the interesting thing about this, it's not just Herefordshire's weather stations. We've got access to the trunk road 49, which obviously goes north-south through the county, and we've got the surrounding ones as well with national highways. We've got Worcester, Shropshire. We've got other areas we can look at just to see what's going on. It's helpful when we see snow coming in. We can see other areas close to ours when it's starting to hit, which we can then forecast what's going to be ours. The guys, when it's snow, they're normally watching this in detail to see what treatment they need and when they need to go. The big hazard we've got is when we get rain and then freezing. In that, we try not to go out when it's raining. It's not impossible not to do it, because once you go out, you're stuck there. But the forecast can be freezing rain, and then you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because it's going to come down and freeze and be a hazard. So it's just trying to do the best treatment we can with the information available. Next one, Henry. Yeah, Vice Island Manager. That's really just where we record everything. That's the bureau. We got a contract with Viasala. They manage the stations for us. They monitor them. They service them, make sure they're fit for purpose, and they go out 3 times a year just to make sure that they're correctly reading, recording, and sending through to MetDesk. So this is where we gather all the information. The MetDesk interpret that information into the forecast, getting through their models countrywide and giving us a site-specific one for Hereford on the roads, not just what the weather's doing in air and everything else. It's actually what's happening on the roads, what the temperature of the road's going to do, and what the hazard is going to be. And as I say, other information comes through about what the condition of the roads are with the wet. Have we got flooding? Have we got runoff adjacent fields that also adds hazards and we need to treat? And that may impact on whether we do 8 grams, 15 grams, or the guy's got the facility in the vehicles. If they see something, they can blast it, heavy treat it, and move on. Next one, please, Henry. Do you want to go on?
Yeah, so helps if I turn it on. So the last couple of slides, really. So on each of the gritters, we've got tracking data. So each of the vehicles is fitted with a system called Masternaut. So we can track those vehicles in real time as they're moving around the network, and also it records what's actually going on at the time. So if we're treating, what they're treating. So we've got that audit record for claims, and also to understand what's actually happened at the time. So that's just an example of a route going out of Hereford, going east. If you move to the next slide, I suppose the point on the previous slide that just to make was just that the vehicles, when they go out, they're limited when they're gritting to a certain speed. So I think it's 30 miles an hour that they're limited to when they're gritting. So often we get complaints about people that the gritter went past at high speed and sprayed me with grit. That's not the case. They only work when they're going through at and spread at 30. So it's limited to that to make sure that they get that spread across the network. And then the final slide, each of the gritters now, they've got dash cams fitted, so we can see. And that can be looked at as well. We can see what the state of the network is when one of the vehicles is out there. But they also have an alarm facility, so the driver can just simply hit a button when they're going through, and basically it takes a segment of video out. So if they see an issue out there on the network, so not necessarily related to winter itself, but in terms of a defect or there's a problem, as Bruce was saying, in terms of ice or water across the road at that particular point, they can hit the button and they can say, yeah, that's a problem. And the system automatically cuts that segment of video out and emails it back to the supervisors back in the office. So the following day or that night, that can get picked up and passed through to somebody to have a look at. So that knowledge and what's seen when they're driving around does get picked up and fed back in. So, okay, that was it in terms of a presentation from us. So,
Thank you very much.
back to you.
That was great. I'm going to start by saying a big thank you to you guys and the team at Thorn, who made myself, Councillor Toynbee and Councillor Baker very welcome a couple of weeks or so ago now, and it was actually a very fascinating afternoon, wasn't it? It was very interesting to get straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, information on the work that they're doing, and to really understand the professionalism and detail that goes into, you know, the decision-making process of gritting our roads, and you know, the dedication of the team for making sure it happens in all weathers. So really appreciate that, and please extend our thanks, I think, on behalf of certainly the councillors that were there on this committee for the time they took to explain it to us. And it has certainly informed the lines of questioning I want to pursue today, some of which you've touched on in the recommendations that have been included in this report. Scott, you're looking at me. Did you want to add to this, or?
It was only to say, and having just had a look at the report and giving a view from, I mean, I'm fairly new to the council, so giving a view from the outside, gritting 46% of your network is fantastic, and it's something that's not happening in many authorities across the country because budget cuts have hit hard. I think the average in the country right now is about 29% of network being gritted. So the fact that Herefordshire is maintaining that high level of readiness is very good.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely got that, and the fact that the first thing this report recommends is that the whole team in delivering the winter maintenance service be noted. Yeah, and they're doing a fabulous job. I'd like to say that to begin with. It really, it was evident that there's a huge amount of dedication, care for what they're doing, and understanding how important it is to our residents that they do a good job, and it seems clear they go above and beyond regularly. One of the things that I'm going to touch on, I think you mentioned it, is the review of the network. I'm going to start on that if people are happy with that, because I think that was one of the primary issues that came out from our meeting, and something you've touched on here today. For those of you that weren't there, the network's divided up into primary and secondary routes, isn't it? So when we obviously get bad weather, the primary routes are the ones that are gritted first, and then if there is capacity or if it's necessary for whatever reason, then the secondary routes get done. But it's been some time, as I understand it, since there's been a review undertaken of the primary routes and the secondary routes, and there seemed to be a strong desire for a review to be undertaken, basically because, you know, should these priority routes change slightly? You know, has road usage changed? Is the new housing growth having an impact upon these? You know, how effective is it at the present time? And I wonder if we could just touch on that. How important do you think it is that we undertake a review, and would you welcome a recommendation from this committee that we suggest that a review is undertaken of the primary and secondary routes prior to the 25-26 season?
Okay, yeah. So I think certainly we would welcome that. I think Bruce mentioned how long ago it was, before 2000 maybe.
2000, early 2000s.
Yeah. So it's been some time since
Quarter of a century, yeah.
Yeah. So since the network's been looked at, obviously you're not going to sort of make those changes sort of, you know, lightly. So it is a significant piece of work, and obviously we get different views from people in terms of what should be gritted, what shouldn't be gritted, and also it recognises that the network is itself, the highway network, doesn't fundamentally change that much from year to year, but equally when you do go back over a significant period of time, there will be changes in terms of new developments that have come in, and also in terms of the usage of the network as well. So I think, you know, that's certainly something that we would, you know, welcome in terms of, you know, you sort of having as a recommendation. But I think that definitely links to point D, in terms of the recommendations, in terms of getting your views on the criteria that we've got. So in the report, in paragraphs 14 and 16, it talks about where we do go and grit. So I think it's easy for people to get in touch with us and say, you don't grit here. We can go back to them and say, yes, we do, no, we don't. But what we would really like to, I suppose, tease out is are we missing anything? So when you look through that criteria, what are your views in terms of where we should be going? I'm not talking about do we turn left at the bottom of plough lane, you know what I mean, and things like that, or do we go right? That's our job to sort that out afterwards. But what would you expect to see gritted and you know, prioritised, I suppose, out there on the network? So
How do we currently engage with sort of town and parish councils around where it needs to be gritted currently?
yeah,
The primary and secondary routes are pretty much set. When it goes into footway treatments and stuff like that, we do engage with parishes. The Lensman has able to do gritting themselves. We support that. We don't generally consult on the day-to-day stuff because it's all, the route treatments with the gritters are pretty much set with the type of roads, type of treatment we want. It's just really the calls for grit bins, the calls for additional salt in additional areas. If there's ice on the network, we will then consider that as part of the programme. What our pressures, our resources available to whether we can go out and support, whether it's by a school or stuff like that that's adverse with water, ice, we'll go out and support where we can. But it's one of the big things we need to consider the resources we got for the rest of the network, as well as supporting the communities.
I was kind of bringing that up in reference to what Ed had just said then around how, you know, where needs to be gritted and how we look at that. And I wanted to know if there's a mechanism, an established mechanism for getting feedback from parish and town councils.
I think the honest answer is probably there isn't, given the length of time that it's been since we've reviewed it. So, I mean, if we go and review the routes, then that would be something that we would obviously need to do a consultation on. Yeah.
So that would be factored into the review, I think. Before I'll open it, just before seeing as you brought it up, grit bins. You did use those two words. I'm sure I'm not alone when I speak for councillors here that this is something residents bring up from time to time. There used to be grit bins at the bottom of my road. There isn't anymore. Why aren't they filled? Why don't you provide it? Just for the sake of everybody here and those people that might be watching this online or later, can you just explain the policy, please, on grit bins? What we provide, when we provide it, or why we don't?
The council's got a list of grit bins we've got around the county. Those are the ones we manage, maintain. What we've done with community commission model is parishes are allowed to purchase grit bins and put them onto the network, and then from there it's their responsibility to fill. We can support that if they commission it through our network, but we've got the assets we've got, we manage and maintain. They will get damaged, they will disappear. We've got an asset register that needs to be updated, and we will replace.
Is it more limited than it used to be? The asset register. I mean, have people noticed a deteriorate? Have grit bins disappeared over the last 25 years, or?
I haven't been here 25 years, so I can't go back that far. But we've got several thousand. So on the asset register, we're obviously going through the preparing for a new contract from June 26. So it's our understanding that there's around 5,000 grit bins out there across the network. So obviously they will be in locations where we feel that they're necessary. But again, that's probably something to review as well. So are they in the right places that people will actually use them? So there's probably points where they're provided, but they will probably never be opened. So obviously that is a pull on resource as well. There's obviously a need for it. So we won't, like you've heard, we don't grit everywhere. So there's a place for these grit bins that people can self-help and self-serve. And then obviously working with parish and town councils as well in terms of their own kit and replenishing.
Of those 5,000, how many are we filling and how many are parish council's responsibility?
I don't have that information, Tam, but I can get that for you, yeah.
So any questions, councillors, on this before we move on? Yep, sorry, Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Going back to the question of a review of the primary and secondary routes, I assume, may be wrong, that when this was last done, there would be a table of data that was used to decide what they were back then, traffic volumes, accident figures, maybe even traffic speeds. I don't know what overall. That data should still be available as of the latest version. It shouldn't be too difficult a job to just compare the same data that we've got available today from various sources with what we used 25 years ago, so that we could actually do the review rather cheaply and easily, rather than doing a huge consultation exercise. Is that a helpful suggestion? Barry Durkin may know a bit more about what traffic data is available for this.
Councillor Hyford, when it was originally done, it's evolved over a number of years. Even before '98, the service evolved. What I remember is back in 2000, it was a review of the gritting routes we've done, trying to rationalise it with the thermal mapping. The data that was used at the time has improved, so traffic volumes, traffic flows, and all those sort of things. So we haven't got that data historically, but we've got good data now from what's available through DFT, through volumes, through types of traffic, where business are. There's a lot more available now than what was then back in '98 to early 2000s. So there's a lot of data we want to tap into, if you like.
Yeah, I know still even then there would have been some sort of scientific way of looking at it. There would have been data that was looked at to decide back then when they were evolving the list. I'm just was hoping that we would be able to compare the better data we've got now and make the job a bit easier to do a review, because it could grow into a bit of a monster if a review of this nature.
I'd love to say we have all the data available. We haven't, because of the age of it. It's 25 years ago. We've got the gritting routes. We've got the historical reasons why we do those routes. But that's as far as it goes. It's not actually the decision making.
Okay, Ed, then Barry.
Yeah, if I can just chip in there, please, Chair. So in the report, it's paragraphs 13 and 4, well, 13 through to I think 16 in the end. So 13 we talk about the priority routes. So they're roads where traffic volumes or speeds are higher. So obviously, if the risk to road safety is high if we don't treat those. So those priority routes, we've got the strategic network that you'd expect to see. Those principal roads, so you can move around the county. Those key commuter routes, obviously routes that are important to the emergency services as well. So and also sort of in terms of operations, and then we take into account public transport routes. So Councillor Highfield, when you're sort of talking about data, that's one example there that we got listed. So we're talking about weekday frequencies of 2 hours or better. So just because there might be parts of the network where there's one bus a day type thing, we don't just automatically go and grit that route. So I suppose what I would like to tease out from you today is in terms of, do you think that criteria is right for the priority routes? And then equally, we talk about where we got significant gradients, exposed areas. So but then the secondary network, we talk about access to schools from the priority route. So we don't automatically go past every single school in the county and grit there. So it's whether you think that we're doing enough on the priority network, or bearing in mind what Scott said, we do treat quite a high proportion. What would your views be in terms of where we should be treating? Are you surprised by what we treat or don't treat as listed in 14 and 16?
Councillor Durkin, Councillor Davis, then Councillor Highfield.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what we're doing now is obviously based upon something that's in a dim and distant past in some respects, and it has been built upon as we've gone year by year, as Bruce has said. And I think this would be a timely recommendation from your committee, Chairman, that we do review this, the first and second lines of attention to roads. I would welcome it because we can then actually have an up-to-date matrix of what's going on. But so I would support that.
Sorry, Councillor Davis. I know Councillor Frank Cornthwaite was going to come in, but we will come to you, Frank. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. On the primary and secondary bus routes, I think primary and secondary gritting routes, I think the bus route which is on the primary list will probably cover most of the schools that are being supported within the county. And I thought they would have therefore been on the primary list and not on a secondary list, potentially, just as an observation. Separately, on the grit bins front, do we have a current plan for replacing grit bins that have become damaged, that are on the inventory belonging to the council? Because I see a lot of them around the rural areas that have been split, flattened, and don't seem they have had any maintenance or care over at least the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm interested whether or not we have a plan to update, replace and maintain those bins. Thank you.
With the primary routes, not all schools are on the primary routes, because some of them are set off into state roads. I'm thinking of Haywood School, those sort of things. Yeah, so that's why they're on the secondary routes, because they're low speed, low volume traffic. We do a lot of precautionary gritting when it goes below zero, because that's a danger on the highway network. On those lower state roads, it's not such an impact. When you do have long spells of freezing, that's when we need to go onto the secondary routes, which will cover those fire stations, police stations, all those other things, just to make sure they're accessible. With the grit bins, we are reliant on localities just going around when they go around in inspections, and they should be identifying our bins that need a repair. There's many different types of bins, going back to South Hereford when they used to put the blue bins out, to bins that have been there for years and out of working order. We do rely on public parish members reporting those, and we will go out and replenish as needed. But there will be those out there that do need to be done and have to be reported. It does come down to what is ours, what's on our register, what is our asset to maintain, manage. Other people do put grit bins out there that would need to commission and get those filled as well.
So you think you would welcome possibly a recommendation that we do a review, come audit of our assets around grit bins at some point in the not too distant future, because it is long overdue.
It's part of the package. Yeah, it'd be great.
Maybe part of the package, but I don't think it should necessarily be. It should be a separate recommendation, I think, to the review of the routes. Yeah, Councillor Highfield.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I'm very comfortable with the criteria that you've established for this. It's very sensible. I was only concerned about hoping there might be an easier way to compare the past with today, so that we could identify where changes were needed, but maybe there isn't.
Yeah, so certainly in terms of traffic volumes and flows, in the past we'd have just been reliant on the counters, the roadside counters, that we obviously won't have on every single road across the network. But obviously as years have gone on, you've got access to different data sets now. So obviously, Google and things like that, maps and things, you can easily see, if you're traveling into somewhere, if there's congestion, there's build up of traffic. So there's other data sets that probably more available to us now that wouldn't have been 25 years ago. So technology's obviously moved on. So that's something to explore and see how we can get better information now and more precise things. And equally, I think one of the car manufacturers now, they're actually recording, temperatures as they're going along and feeding that back. So it allows better decision making as well. So if
I could just come in, I think there will be an established way for doing this, and I think the fact that it's so important that we get this right, when you're dealing with people's lives, in the event of there being an accident or something like that, that I think we have to follow the established way for doing a review such as this, rather than it being maybe looking at a desktop review or something that might, on paper save money, but we need to be 100% certain that we're doing it correctly, I would have thought. Yeah, Councillor Thornthwaite.
So looking at the Bloor Home Estate, which is in Homer Ward, one of their big difficulties is that loads of houses are being built, obviously, and are continuing to be built, but the roads haven't been adopted. So this winter I had to make sure that on one area they did have a facility to grit, but I'm thinking that's one area, when we build an estate like that then gets used as a rat run, because it's a very convenient way to come off the Brecon Road to get onto and not come via the starting gate, but to go on to get onto the 49. So Hedgerow Way is effectively almost as busy as any other road around Hereford. And yet, of course, it's not been formally adopted by the council. So I'm thinking, how can we get round that so that places like that are dealt with quite early, even if we haven't adopted them formally as a council? Can we do that? But places like that, of course, do need to come on to a priority gritting schedule, don't they? Am I right?
Simple answer, yes. It would be one that we'd be looking at, because obviously the connection between the 49 4103, it does alleviate that pressure of Starting Gate roundabout. I suppose it's the thing now is, until they finish the road, we could have problems with what damage we could cause it, and it's just really, I suppose, it's when do we intervene that with the team we got, Andy being sort of managers of 278, we can take that away and see where they are on the adoption process and whether we can accelerate that and get that sorted.
I'd have thought any review would take into consideration local knowledge with the parish councillors and the lengthsmen. I thought Councillor Toynbee, then Councillor Foxton.
Yes, thank you. As we all know, this is something residents care very deeply about, so it's really useful to have this coming up and to have all this information out for everybody to see.
Sorry, gentlemen. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying it's something that residents care a lot about, as we all know, and it's very useful to have all this information out now for everybody to see. So thanks, everybody. And as you said, Chair, it was really interesting going out to visit the depot and to hear from the people who are actually doing the work out on our roads. And one of the things they explained was about the fact that there were two treatment teams, and it struck me that when they're in need, when they're needed, the system, feels as though it might be working at full stretch. So my first question is, just wondering how you're feeling about the resilience and the resourcing of that two teams system, and if you're reassured that is okay, adequate. As far as the criteria are concerned, I don't have any particular concerns or comments about that, but it might be useful, parish councils keep coming up, don't they? So it might be useful to be explicit or have a plan about, how the parish councils will be engaged in whatever's going to happen with the review of routes, of priorities, of registers, of grit bins. So maybe to have that made explicit, what's the plan for how we're going to work with them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. We'll come to you in a second, Councillor Foxton. I was going to touch on the teams a bit, but it might just be worth explaining how the two teams work and the fact they're on call for 6 months of the year, effectively. And it did feel as if the feedback we were getting from them is that they would welcome potentially a third team, which might give them a few days off every 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Councillor Toynbee. So we've got the 15 priority routes that the teams will look after, and like you said, they're split into two teams. So ultimately one sort of covering the days and one covering the nights. Like I said at the start of the meeting, the team that we've got, the 48 staff, they wear two hats. So they've obviously got their day job. If that team that are working in the day shift, I suppose, or covering the chance of going out during the day to grit, that means that they then can't go out and do the work that they would ordinarily do. And that's not sort of unique to Herefordshire, I think. When I've worked elsewhere, that's been a similar situation. Obviously, if there's snow on the ground and the conditions aren't right, there's very little that you can actually go out and do. And then obviously you've got the team on at night as well, and then they will switch from week to week. But you are right in terms of that obviously has an impact. Yes, that's their role. They're obviously paid to do that and be on it. We're always sort of, I suppose, that there will be vacancies that come up for drivers, and that's the role of Balfour Beatty to fill that. We don't dictate to them that they must have 2, 3, however many teams. It's up to them to sort of manage their resources. But personally, I've probably got some sympathy for them. It obviously means that for 6 months they are on that call, and it's a very long time. So it obviously has an impact on their own personal lives and what they can go and not do. So obviously, they couldn't go out and enjoy a drink in an evening and things like that because they've got to drive. And Yeah, that's something that we can feed back. Obviously, as part of the next contract, again, we would be asking providers to come up with their own plans of how they would resource effectively.
So effectively, it's a Balfour Beatty internal structure
Yes.
for delivering the service.
Yeah.
And that's obviously, as far as Balfour Beatty is concerned, the most cost-effective way. It's not something we have requested or have power over to manage, but we could potentially highlight the fact that we are concerned that they might be getting burnout on some of their team.
Yeah, so obviously from our point of view, if we did instruct them to say provide 3 teams, there would be that additional cost in terms of training additional people to provide it. Equally, though, with the new operating model, it's a scheduler rates contract. So if the team are doing the winter service and they're not obviously out fixing defects on the network, then they're not generating that income, you know what I mean, and providing that service. So it'll be interesting to see what the new model comes back with and whether they make any changes as part of that. But personally, like I said, yeah, I do kind of have that sympathy for them that they obviously, it's a long time, it's half the year that they're providing that service that they have to be, even though we might not be going out gritting. So we budget, I think it's 83 treatments that we budget for. We don't know when they're going to be. They are on call every time, every day with that chance of potentially going out. So last night they went out. Obviously, last week was a bit warmer, so they didn't need to. But yeah.
Councillor Foxton?
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting and very reassuring. Yes, really good. 2 things. In my ward, Ein Hill, the clue's in the name, I've got the steepest hill in the city, namely Quarry Road. And feeding onto Quarry Road is Dormington Drive, and it is a rat run. And I have it reported to me and flagged up to me. I've been out and done my own survey early morning, and to say it's busy, it's not just busy. It's drivers very impatient, going quite fast, and there are residents are leaving cars out on the road, which slows the traffic down, and they're aware of it. They are, I mean, it's very, very interesting to do a survey on things, and I noted the cars. Do you prioritise certain rat runs? For example, I live on a rat run, South Bank Road. It's not a problem, really, because cars have to stop to allow for the oncoming traffic. So it's self-perpetuating, slows itself down. And that's on a hill, it works. But there are certain rat runs that are, I mean, do you prioritise those?
So in paragraph 14, where we talk about the priority routes, we talk about commuter routes. So I suppose if, obviously over time things can change. So
Yes.
when we obviously set the initial routes, is that example that you've given, Dormington Drive, Quarry Road, is that something that wasn't happening a few years ago? As
Yeah.
traffic levels have increased, that would be an example of coming out to you, as part of the review, and saying, actually, look, have we got these right? Are there particular areas of interest that you've got, or you're regularly getting feedback on from people? So obviously you could end up. You could grit everywhere if you wanted to, but you're going to need a significantly, increased resource to be able to do that. And whether that's value for money is a separate conversation, I think. But it's, are there tweaks that need to be made to the network? Does it reflect today's pattern of traffic and what people want to do out there on the network?
That's excellent, because things do change, don't they? And priorities change. Basically, drivers try and avoid the traffic lights at the bottom, which for some reason is just very testing for people. Understandable. Okay, thank you very much. I've really, really found it interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. I think obviously those if you have any information that you want to share around routes that aren't currently being gritted, I think that would obviously feed into any review, either through yourself or through the parish council, the lengthsman, I would have thought. I just want to touch briefly on the weather service, if I may. I don't think we've questions around that. I know that there were, certainly online, social media, there was some concern about the contract that was awarded for the new service. But one of the things that I was unaware of was that the quality of the data that you're now getting is significantly superior to what you were getting before. And I think there is some messaging that perhaps Herefordshire Council could look to take from that information. You were telling us at the meeting at Thorn that every time, for instance, councillors might not be aware, you grit a route, the cost of going out to do one grit, is approximately £8,000. And this information that they have, the detailed information from the new weather service, has meant already over the last few months, on 2 occasions, the new information has meant that gritting was not required on those 2 nights, because the road surface temperature was being properly measured. They could predict more accurately what was required. That is a significant saving to the council. If we're saving in the region of getting on for £20,000 already in this one season because of that new information, I think that's a good news story, and that needs to mitigate the cost of the new service, because that £140,000 is over the next 4 years, I believe. So if 2 or 3 times a year we're saving money, then I suggest we put in a recommendation that the comms team flags that up and highlights that the new weather service will actually be saving money for Herefordshire Council. The flip side of that, and I think this is also worth highlighting, is that the new information from the weather service could also be advising the teams to go out when they might not previously have been going out. So there might be occasions when it does go out, and in those situations, we could actually be saving lives who otherwise could get missed. So I think there is something there that needs to be discussed. Would you agree that that's something that hasn't been perhaps communicated as well as it could have been by the comms team? And would you welcome that recommendation from this committee that it is explored and that some kind of press release is put out?
I'd certainly welcome that, Chair. I think it's probably ensuring that people understand the messages and understand exactly how things work. So I think there's a misconception that we're paying somebody £140,000 as our own weather forecaster, as a dedicated role, to sit there and effectively look out the window every day is what the public perception seems to be, which is absolutely not the case. So the contract that we have, it's with MetDesk. So in the report we talk about that. It's a professional service that we have. It's a weather service. They provide that monitoring that Bruce was talking about, that on-call support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's their own team of those experienced meteorologists so that we draw on. So they provide highly detailed information to us as a county that we receive. As we spoke about those several times a day that we receive those forecast information, it obviously draws on the weather station information that we've got. And I think, it's £35,000 a year that it costs us for that, which personally I think is good value for money when you put it into context that you described about the cost per treatment, and ultimately it's about getting that decision right. So the main thing is making sure that we do go out when we need to go out to ensure the safety of people out there on the network of the parts that we do treat, and it's about making sure that the county, it flows, that you can get to where you need to get to. So if it's you trying to attend a hospital appointment or in an emergency situation, absolutely that is right up there. But equally, making sure that children can get to school, their education isn't disrupted. You can get to work, even though more people work from home. Maybe there are alternative options now. It's still ensuring that the network is accessible and it's open. Against also, like you said, that we don't go out and the decision is wrong and ultimately that money could have been spent on something else. So we would definitely welcome that. I think it's just a case of the message was picked up and it was misinterpreted, and then sadly that's run and run.
I think it would be good to actually have some figures on if exactly how many times we haven't gone out when in past we might have done for the current season as part of any comms. I think that would be very, very useful, so that people can realise that, say it's £20,000, then all of a sudden that £35,000 a year doesn't sound like anything near to what it was before. Councillor Durkin, were you going to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. I fully endorse what Ed has said. There was some communication on this before it was actually a thing within the council. It's important to realise that what you've seen this morning, it is a global, Herefordshire-style global way of controlling how we effectively, cost-effectively and safely deliver our services in a winter maintenance. And I agree with you entirely that if we don't go out when we say £20,000, it's bought and paid for. But what rapidly got about was that we were, as has been heard, employing somebody at £140,000 a year to look out the window and say if it's raining or if it's snowing or whatever. And that perpetuated itself. And no amount of persuasion or education was able to shift that focus. So I would like to endorse, as you said earlier on, about the further information going out in comms, because what we're doing, as you quite rightly say, is an important thing. It's saving people's lives. That's what it's all about. And if it costs £130,000 a year to save one life, monetarily speaking, it's cheap. Thank you, Chair.
Completely agree. And I think in part it might come down to the style and manner of the way we present our comms. And I think there are lessons to be learned. I mean, it might be worth considering that as we put out this message. I think sometimes we can be a little bit, through necessity, dry, and it perhaps isn't as attention grabbing or as some posts that appear in social media. But I think something that's brief and to the point and properly gets the message out to counter this negativity would be of great value, and for our residents who would then properly understand the true service that we're purchasing and how it's important and the money that can be saved if it's being, when the information is more accurate. Sorry, did you want to come in? Sorry, Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. Still on this topic. So I was just wondering, maybe I should know this. Is there more to our contract with Met Desk than just alerting us to freezing temperature? I mean, if they're looking at the weather in general, there are lots of other things that would be useful for us to know, what's on its way, whether it's strong winds or extreme heat or heavy rain or potential flooding and things like that. So do we use it in that broader way as well?
Yeah. Met Desk do other things. We're exploring with them what they can and can't do. They do stuff. They've just been in discussions when they do precipitation, what's happening on the network, so flooding, rainfall forecasting, stuff like that. With our own service at winter, they do a bit more than just highlight what's coming up. They will tell us what's happening with flooding, rain, severity of it, winds, all those sort of things are part of that forecast. What we do get in complementing that at the same time, we do get a lot of weather warnings through the Met Office, through the emergency services, through the resilience team, that give you the bigger picture. As part of what we do as well with winter, we do dovetail into the TCG, which is the blue light service, when it comes to the Peace from the East, for example, where we put resources, how we resource things up. So there is a bigger picture that we do feed into with winter.
And if I can just chip in there, just to expand on a couple of points there. So in terms of the information that we get from the Met Office, so with rainfall events, we will get alerts about those from the Met Office and also through the Environment Agency, and then we end up on calls that are very detailed in terms of what the impact will be. So you end up with a forecaster from the Met Office on each of those TCG calls that Bruce has talked about, where sort of all the emergency services get together and we discuss what the likelihood and impact will be. So say, there's an amber weather warning for rainfall that comes in. We will have a discussion about what that would likely have, what the impact will be on Herefordshire itself. And they will talk about, the Met Office will talk about expected levels of rainfall in terms of millimetres that we might see in parts of the county that we might see impacted. And then colleagues from the Environment Agency will say what that might mean in terms of river levels. And then obviously when that rainfall event has happened, the Environment Agency can then explain when we're going to see peaks. So you will see a peak of 5.2 metres on the River Wye at Greyfriars, but then it will hit Ross a day later and it will be this. So we get that level of information, but for this, we don't get that from the Met Office in terms of winter, in terms of the road surface temperatures, which is what we really need in terms of the detailed information from Met Desk. So yes, we all can watch the television, and we can hear the news, and we know it's going to be cold, but we need to know, as the team in highways, what that means in terms of it's going to be cold. Where is it going to be cold? What time, so we can get out there on the network and treat it beforehand and make sure that you can move safely around. So
I think one of the things that also came out through the conversation was at the moment we're getting very, very detailed 24-hour forecasts from Met Desk. And talking to the guys at Thorn, one of the things that they felt would be of benefit to them would be if that was increased to 36 hours. And I don't know whether that's a recommendation you'd like us to make and whether it's something that could be considered. If they had a 36-hour detailed forecast rather than the 24-hour detailed forecast, I was of the understanding it would give you a lot more opportunity to get the shift patterns right and to prepare a lot more in advance for what you're going to need from a manpower point of view, and also for because at the moment it can all be quite condensed into the space of a few hours. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment we get 24 hours detailed, and then as we said in the report, we get 2 to 5 days, which is light touch in comparison. The 36 hours would then give you a better opportunity to plan. So rest for the guys, because they're obviously doing back-to-back or whatever, but also gives you the opportunity to do treatments of footpaths, other things, when you can plan in different resources, what you've got available to go elsewhere. It would be great to recognise that as part of the report. We are in train to get that sorted, so we've gone through spend panel, we're talking to Met Desk, and we can have that implemented quite quickly. We're looking at, before the end of the season, we'll have it in place for the next couple of seasons and towards the end of this one as well.
It's already happening in 36 hours?
We're going through the process. We haven't commissioned it yet, but we've got the approvals to go through and get that commissioned.
Have we got the budget set aside for that yet?
Yeah, we're using winter budget for that.
Okay.
It's not a significant amount to extend it for that time, so it's within the budgets we've got allocated.
So a recommendation would be that we recognise the need for the extension from 24 hours to 36 hours for the detailed forecast, and approve the endorse the this move because the importance to our road network. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Chairman, I don't want to belabor this point, but I just thinking about members of the public that might be watching this presentation. I know my sons are sailors, and I know they use free apps like the Windy app and the BBC app and things to look at weather and wind conditions and when it's going to rain and when it's not, etc. And that is a certain level of detail which never used to be there 20 years ago. And so we always had a weather service that provided a greater level of detail to us for highway winter maintenance issues. But what those services don't have is they don't have the information that's coming from our weather stations out there, road temperatures, etc. And the importance of getting the accuracy of when something and when an event's going to happen is really critical. If you know it's going to rain, you're not going to go out and salt the road because the salt will be washed off the road before it freezes. You've got to know when that rain is going to stop so that you can tell your drivers when to go, and so it's not, you can't just have people hanging around, so you've got to plan all these things, and so the more information you have in greater detail, the better, which is why we invest in these sorts of services.
It's almost like a military operation, isn't it? It's very, very coordinated and very impressive, so thank you. Unless there's any other questions, I am of a mind to take a short break while we formulate our recommendations. I certainly want to thank everybody that's come along this morning. It's been very useful, and please again pass on our thanks to the guys at the depot for the time they've taken, both to welcome us as councillors and for the detail that you guys have put into this report. and hopefully we'll make some recommendations that will continue to build on the great work that they're all doing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest that we stop the feed and we take. It's 1:15. Well, should we just take 10 minutes now to formalise our recommendations, and then we'll start the feed again at 25 past. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. Sorry if we're a couple of minutes longer than we anticipated. Could we put the draft recommendations up on the screen, please?
They're on the screen, Chair.
Okay, I've worked on these. We've worked on these briefly during the break. If I could ask the monitoring officer to read them out, please.
I wish I were the monitoring officer, just a humble statutory scrutiny officer today.
Scrutiny officer. Sorry, I do
Sorry, Claire.
apologise.
Okay, the recommendations for the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee on the 12th of March 2025 are as follows. Recommendations concerning winter maintenance. That Herefordshire Council, 1. Review and update the primary and secondary routes on the Gritting network. 2. Undertake an audit of the number and location of local authority-owned grit bins. And 3. Carry out comprehensive publicity to demonstrate the value and effectiveness of the commissioned professional weather services resulting from accurate forecasting.
Is the committee happy with those as our recommendations? I'm also minded that, having discussed this with the statutory scrutiny officer during the break, that there is a degree of nuance that doesn't come out in these recommendations that around what they're doing, that there might be some value in a letter coming from this committee, which I'm happy to draft, just to talk around a few more detailed areas where we think they're doing great work and we're offering our support. For instance, moving from the 24 hours to the 36 hours around forecasting. That isn't necessarily a recommendation, but it's something where we can offer our support. If the committee is happy, I can work with Daniel and we can draft a letter and I can circulate it before it's sent, which could be in addition to these recommendations.
The intention with that suggestion being that that letter is actually published in the papers for your subsequent meeting.
Is the committee minded to agree with that? Okay. Yeah. Well, if in that case, can I have a proposer for these recommendations, please? Councillor Cornthwaite, a seconder. Councillor Foxton, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right. We're going to move on now to section 8 in the agenda, which is an update on the recommendations made by the Connected Communities Scrutiny Committee, which I found extremely interesting. You should all have a chance to look at it in your papers, and I think Daniel's going to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Since July 2023, 2024, I should say, the Scrutiny Committees of Herefordshire Council issued 174 recommendations to officers and other elected members of the council. Can you not hear me?
Are these mics being amplified in the room? They normally are. I don't think there's any amplification in the room.
Okay. There is on YouTube, yeah. So, okay. I've presented to you here a set of the recommendations that this committee has made since the 19th of July 2023. Just a few things to note. We started this piece of work in collating and sharing these back in the summer last year. At that point, we had a change in staff members here, and when we started to collate these, it wasn't always. There were two issues that we really needed to clear up and tighten up on. First one, it will be familiar to some of you who've been in scrutiny for a while, was understanding the difference between actions and recommendations. So we've tightened up a lot on keeping actions away from our recommendations and keeping them on our to-do lists where they belong and not bothering cabinet members with them. The second thing was really getting a grip on making sure that we got responses from recommendations, because all too often they just vanish into inboxes, never to be seen again. Now, I am reasonably confident that since I've started here, recommendations, when issued by committees, have gone to the relevant people for a response. Where we as a service have failed is in comprehensively recording the fact that we've done that. So, when we had a reorganisation in July, Henry here, who is the committee clerk, was tasked with the job of being the central resource for managing our recommendations and getting responses to them. We agreed back in July when we started to do this that where we didn't have information as to the state of recommendations already, we would essentially start with a clean slate. So even though it looks here like it took sometimes 14 months for us to actually even issue the recommendations to officers, that was simply that was the last day that we could say categorically, where we have an audit trail, that we sent those recommendations out. So we took a decision back in October that where we had gaps, we would just send the recommendations out to officers again, rather than spend weeks and months trying to find out what's happened to them. We would just reissue them for the sake of expediency. So we can say now that categorically that all of the recommendations that you have issued have been given to officers. They've been given to officers several times, and they've been chased several times now. And the responses that we've received thus far, which is not bad for this committee compared to others, are now presented towards you. The one thing that we have noted, having done this exercise, is that quite often the narrative doesn't necessarily address the recommendation that's been given. Sometimes, I'll be blunt, it's just flannel. Other times, there's been the officers have action plans underneath the recommendations, but we haven't recorded those or captured them here. So that's something we can do going forward. What's not also clear as well in a lot of these is whether or not the officers and the members have accepted the recommendations or where they've rejected them. So going forward, that's something that we're going to ask them to be more categorical about future. You know, what is your response? Reject, accept, partially accept. So it's been a very interesting exercise from an administrative point of view. We feel that we have a grip on your recommendations and the responses. We've begun that process, I think, of really laying down to officers that they do need to respond to recommendations and within the timescale. But there is still quite a bit to go there. So here is what we have so far in terms of responses, and we would very much welcome your thoughts on how you'd like to take these going forward.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Henry, particularly for all the work you've done on this. It is appreciated, and it's, there's a considerable amount of work gone into this just so that we have got an update. Something that I think we need to look at is how we deal with deadlines. I think there needs to be a degree of accountability, and there needs to be a degree of escalation as well. I think when officers are being chased for answers, at the moment, I think you're emailing them after 2 months. They're required to answer within 2 months, and then if you don't hear anything, a couple of weeks later, you'll send another one. I think it might be an idea to introduce some form of process that we are happy with, and I don't know how you feel about this, councillors, but I'd like to suggest that if, for instance, there's a 2-month period by which time they're supposed to have responded. I would suggest that if after 6 weeks there's been no response, a reminder is sent out from Henry saying that the 2 weeks, the 2 months deadline is approaching. We need to have an answer to these recommendations by X date. At 2 months, I suggest that then there is an escalation. If we haven't heard anything, that the second email is sent out, and this time it goes to the directorate as well, to the head of the directorate, to the director. Within that directorate, they're copied in on that at 2 months dead, so that it's been escalated to the top of that directorate. And then I would suggest at, say, 10 weeks, so another 2 weeks, they copy in the chair of the committee. So there's 3 emails. At which point we can take it up with politically if we need to, or we could go to Paul if needs be. But so there's a set process for you, and it's not always you just having. The email isn't just coming from you each time. There is a process by which it is being escalated, and we can then review it. And I think then we should also review quarterly progress updates on all of the outstanding recommendations. Does that sound like an idea for something we can introduce, Councillor Toynbee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's really helpful to bring up the issue of deadlines. And you mentioned, chasing officers and then, if necessary, escalating to directors and everything. And then, but I think we should include Cabinet as well. That, our recommendations are frequently to Cabinet, aren't they? And that's who I would like to see responses from.
Well, I think if the response is required from cabinet, then that should be reminded at 6 weeks. I mean, it's whoever that recommendation has been made to, isn't it?
Yes, the cabinet member does actually give sign-off at the end.
Okay, so okay, yeah, Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, I'd like Daniel's opinion, because it seems to me this is very sensible, but it would be good if all the scrutiny committees had a similar system for chasing up their recommendations. And I don't know what Daniel wants to say about that. He sits on many of them, so.
I sit on all of them. No, I think it's a really good suggestion. What I would recommend is rather than making recommendations on the operations now, because I think they're all sound, to be quite honest. I don't object to any of them. I think they're really good ideas. But be aware that I'll be having this conversation another 4 times with the other committees. So you're right. I think if you wanted to put a recommendation in, I would make a recommendation on that you send me off to go and find a better solution to this, rather than telling me the solution. And then we'll take that round to the committees. That's not to say that your suggestions are wrong at all. I think they sound perfectly reasonable, but let's take it around the 5 committees and then give me the opportunity to sort of pull that together and bring it back to the committees. Does that sound?
Yeah, I think it's one option. We could also make a decision as a committee that that's how we want to work.
True.
And we've got quite a lot of outstanding recommendations. I am of a mind to make this recommendation that this is how this committee wants to work, and but it's just a series of 3 emails at this point, at intervals with a quarterly update. And if there is a better way of doing it that comes out through other committees, then that can come back to us. Sorry, Councillor Foxton, did you want to come in?
I'm just mindful with bureaucratic messages and requirements and such, that it's not hindering the time, say, of the Bruce and Ed, their terrific work, very vital work, fascinating, so technical and scientific, that we're not hindering their work, sort of adding too much extra.
I think the committee makes recommendations, and we need an update to make sure. And it isn't not all the recommendations are the kind of recommendations we make today. They go back. I think it's 175 recommendations you said have been made over the last 12 months across the committees.
Correct.
To delete them?
No, they accumulate forever. They do.
There's a big box at reception.
No, they never die, ever. No. So, I mean...
Apologies online.
No, I mean at the moment, and this is another question. I don't think it's one that the council's ever really answered. And if I might say, no local authority that I've ever worked at has really satisfactorily answered this. At what point do we determine that a recommendation can be forgotten? At the moment, they're all here. Those are your responses. So and you don't have to answer this now, of course, but this is to the committee. What do you want to do with all these responses? Do you want me to write them up in the annual report? Do you want me to, do you want to have a discussion about actually what have they achieved? Did you want a narrative response to this? Do you want to mark any of them as complete so we can just move on from them? Do you want further action? So really, it's down to you.
Well, I think a good example of where something has worked would be the report that we've done recently through 3 Dragons around affordable housing, that's gone through to the working group, that's then went through to cabinet last week and was approved. I mean, that is an example of good practice and how a scrutiny committee should work. And we can log that, and now we can put a big tick against that, and that no longer needs to be on our on our past recommendations. It is done, and it can be ticked. I think where there are if officers choose not to accept a recommendation, I think that could also mean that recommendation has effectively been completed. And I think that can be acknowledged as such. And maybe there is something when we do make this table whereby they are colour-coded or whatever, and we can see where recommendations are yet to be implemented, have been accepted, have been rejected. And I think that will give us all the information we require to be able to look through it and say, well, and then when we're looking at our work programme moving forward, if we've made recommendations in the past that have been rejected, that might well be a reason for us to put something back on our work programme to look at next year. Do people feel that's a potential way forward? Okay, yeah, Councillor Highfield, then Councillor Owens.
Yeah, I don't take this as a vote because I'm just a visitor to this committee, but I'd like you to reconsider your apparent intention to say this is the way this committee wants to work and we should go and do it. It is sensible, but not, I don't think, to ignore what the other scrutiny committees want to do. Many of us sit on many scrutiny committees and get quite confusing how we're going to chase up these recommendations. So I'd recommend that we would go with what Daniel suggested and speak to the others, but do it soon, but hopefully come back with it. Yeah, we'll all do it this way, and that's how we're going to chase these up, and this is how we're going to do it. I'd recommend that would be the way forward, but it's up to you because I'm only a visitor here.
I'm torn. How do the rest of the committee feel? Councillor Owens.
Sorry, at least it works. Thank you. I took from what Daniel was saying that this was consulting all of the committees as part of a process working on best practice. Is that the case, or is that something that's ultimately going to go to scrutiny management?
I mean,
what is the process?
It will. I mean, all 5 of the committees are going to receive a report pertinent to their committee, including Scrutiny Management Board, because obviously it makes its own recommendations. So over the course of March, there'll be 5 of these reports, one going to each committee. They're really asking the same questions of them. So, you know, the objective primarily is just to start this process of actually responding to recommendations or dealing with them after they've been made, because previously in the past here at the council, they just vanish into the ether. So really at the moment there's no process, there's no protocol in place at the moment. We can put one in around how we chase recommendations to try and tighten up response rates. We can absolutely do that. Again, I would be cautious about having 5 different ways of working for 5 different committees, not least because of then obviously graces of respect, you don't stay in post forever, and then somebody else comes along with a different way of working.
I think this committee can recognise that the current system isn't working as well as it could. We can suggest that a system of escalation with an agreed time frame for response is introduced, and that we would like to see this considered by all of the other scrutiny committees, so that it could be adopted uniformly across the council. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Yeah, fine.
And if I could just intercede, I sit on other committees. If that came to the other committees, I would support it there. I'd say, yeah, this was a good idea, we should do that.
Great, okay. Did you capture that? Does that roughly?
Press the wrong button.
Yeah.
It's easily done.
I'm busy writing both recommendations with a view to accepting one of them.
Yeah.
So
I think so. We recommend that a system of escalation is introduced across all the committees with timed emails to ensure both before the deadline and after that escalates up the food chain, however you want to phrase that, to ensure timely response to recommendations, which will hopefully help us do our jobs better. Something also I wanted to mention that came out is that, especially around the financial breakdowns for Shire Hall, Maylords Orchard and the enterprise zones, despite repeated requests, a lot of financial details have been kept confidential. I think the council needs to provide clear justifications for why that information is being kept confidential when we've requested it as a scrutiny committee. It's obvious. This goes back to 2023. We should be able to find that information, like how much did it cost to cancel Maylords was one of the questions that came out. We've asked that on numerous occasions from Scrutiny. That information has been kept confidential and hasn't been provided. I'm guessing that must appear somewhere in the accounts. However, where exactly that is in the accounts, we have yet to be properly informed, and we have been told that financial details are being kept confidential. So I think a recommendation I would like to make would be that for increased transparency in financial reporting and to provide clear justifications as to why certain financial details are kept confidential, despite requests from Scrutiny. People happy with that? I think that's something that's come out of the report, that we're not getting the information we ask for. If there's a good reason, if it's commercially sensitive, that's absolutely fine. If it's because it's potentially politically sensitive, I would argue that that perhaps isn't quite so fine. And that we, as a scrutiny committee, hopefully sitting outside of the political political wrangling, if we unanimously request that information, which we did, we'd be entitled to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Any problems with that as a recommendation?
Not a problem as such. I'm just questioning whether or not it would address the issue that you're seeking. You're right. I mean, because in the report they mention that they're withholding some information. They mention it's for commercial sensitivity, but they don't provide any extra further detail. But at the moment, that's the only example I've seen of this. This doesn't. I've yet to see a pattern of this happening in the local authority, and crucially, the Scrutiny Committee hasn't been presented with evidence of a pattern of this happening. So what I mean, obviously it's a question, it's a perfectly valid question. I suggest that you ask the portfolio holder to account for that in the meeting and to explain what it is, or whether they can provide any more detail as to why the commercial confidentiality requires them to not disclose this information. Because you're right, it's a thin line. Is it around political embarrassment, or is it around financial expediency? I suspect that you will never ever really get to the bottom of all of that, because it's a scrutiny committee rather than an audit process or an external audit process. But I would ask the questions first before making the recommendation, because if I'm honest, it just feels a little heavy-handed at the moment for what you've been presented with.
Okay, so we could still, based upon this report, ask for the full financial breakdowns that were requested previously for projects like Maylords Orchard, and provide clear justifications for why, if they choose to keep certain financial details confidential, they're doing so. Yeah,
I would do it that way, either in writing or or asking them to attend a meeting.
So are you suggesting we don't put that into a recommendation out of today's meeting?
Well, it strikes me as the recommendation you're making is quite general around confidential information in response to a specific incident or a specific example. And the point I'm making is I think making general recommendations on the back of one data point is perhaps a little heavy-handed.
Okay, can I suggest that we look at this issue in our next work programme meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's fine. I think it's something that's came out. Thank you for highlighting it, Henry, within your report. We won't put in a specific recommendation around it today, but we will look at it with our work programme meeting to see if it's something we want to bring in or discuss and ask an officer to speak to us or a portfolio holder at a future meeting.
Okay, I'll make sure that's on your to-do list for the meeting in April, which you all have an invite to, by the way.
Okay, I think we've got we got a draft recommendation out of that.
The one that I have at the moment is, I'll just read it out draft first and I'll put it on the screen afterwards, that Herefordshire Council ensures that the Statutory Scrutiny Officer drafts a protocol to ensure more timely responses to outstanding recommendations, is what I have so far. Does that sound... I'm trying to keep the sort of detail out at the moment of the, you'll do this in 6 weeks. I'll put it on the screen. Hold on, bear with me.
I think there should be something around escalation. It's got to address a protocol to ensure more time responses to outstanding recommendations. Yeah, maybe the escalation comes after the timely responses. Ensures that the statutory scrutiny officer drafts a protocol to ensure timely responses with faster escalation as required. To outstanding recommendations. Yeah, Councillor Owens.
I would suggest that you, because I suspect the committees, all five of the other committees, are almost certainly going to make a similar recommendation. And I would bet my wagers that Councillor Stark in Environmental Sustainability will be making a far more strident recommendation along these lines anyway. So what I'm suggesting is you make the recommendation, great, I've got it there. The other committees are almost certainly going to make a similar recommendation. Leave it to me to work with the chairs to produce a protocol that everyone's happy with, and then I will bring this back in a report to the committees going forward. I intend to produce, along with your work programme, the intention is that this will become a rolling regular report that you will receive anyway. So I can, in future reporting, I can easily report back and say, okay, we've changed the protocol and this is how we do things in a future report. I don't need to write a bespoke report. I will just add it to this. I think it might be useful to say a cross-committee protocol, actually. Ensures that the statutory scrutiny officer drafts a cross-committee protocol to ensure timely responses to vascular systems required. So it's clear it isn't just responding to connected communities. So this is something across all the scrutiny committees, as mentioned. Yeah. Yeah. Happy with that? Yeah.
A cross-scrutiny committee protocol to ensure timely responses with faster escalation as required. Don't need the comma, to outstanding recommendations, I don't think, anyway. That's great. Happy with that? Proposer? Councillor Foxton, seconder. Councillor Davis, all those in favour? Thank you. Right, moving on, we get to our work programme. To consider the work programme for the remainder of 25. And I think, Daniel, you were gonna put this up on the screen?
Bear with me, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, could you actually? Just give both a moment, Chair. The Henry will load it for you.
That's great. So we've got March at the top, so that we're looking at the cultural strategy in May. We've got meetings coming up for that. And I think we're looking at attendees there from potentially the Courtyard, Hereford Museum, Cultural Partnership, and also we'll be looking at the LTP in May as well. So we've got quite a nice work programme lined up. As far as the cultural strategy is concerned, we're at the midpoint, 2019 to 2029. It's recently been updated, so it'll be good to get the Culture and Leisure Lead in to talk to us about that.
Chair, you have a new officer as well, responsible for drafting the local transport plan. You might remember Victoria came to your earlier meeting, and it was her swan song, one might say, was to produce that before leaving. So we have a new officer who will be presenting that, who I met with earlier in the week. So, and it's somebody I've worked with previously. So I think you'll be in very safe hands with that. I'm looking forward to seeing what she produces.
Okay, have I got a meeting scheduled to have a chat with her before our May meeting?
No, would you like one?
I think a meeting would be good, yes,
Great
please.
stuff.
If you could schedule that,
Okay.
great. We'll move on to the next page. Everyone, Councillor Toynbee?
Yes, thank you. While we're still on this page, it refers nicely to our previous item, the update on recommendations, which we're so grateful for to the clerk. because in there's quite a lot of reference to engaging stakeholders, especially in the relationship to transport and LC WIP and all that kind of thing. So here for the cultural strategy, we've got some external people who are going to be invited. And as far as I can see for the draft local transport plan, we haven't got any external people being invited. And, you know, in accordance with some of the things that came up in the recommendation in the previous item, you know, there are lots of, you know, third sector local transport groups, local disability forum, you know, there are quite a lot of local groups who take a keen interest and do a lot of work for nothing on trying to improve local transport and mobility. So I hope we can consider inviting some of them.
Are there some groups, individuals you would like to suggest we invite along?
Yes, I'm not going to do it right here now off the top of my head because there isn't much in the top of my head. But yeah, yes. And I think some of them might be mentioned by name in the recommendations update. I'm not quite sure.
I think there's tremendous value in this, actually, and I would like us to possibly, if we could suggest names outside of the meeting, maybe via email, to Daniel, if you could copy me in. If there's if there's anybody you think should be at that meeting, email Daniel, copy me in, and let's see if we can get more value out of that meeting. That's a great idea. Thank you. Can we move on to the next page, please? Okay, so we've got members of the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee as well coming to that meeting for LTP. So that's good. We're going to have a busy meeting. And July, we'll be looking at the tourism and destination management. Again, we've got the culture and leisure lead attendees. I would suggest we also look at inviting someone from the D bid, destination bid, and visit Herefordshire. I think that would be of value. So if they could be put on that as an attendee. For tourism, definitely. Anybody else that we think should be coming along for tourism? No, I think we...
Museums people, maybe?
Possibly, although that might be more under culture. Yeah. There's crossover. Yeah. And then we have gully cleansing as well. So, which I'm very excited about. I am. It is. Whoever thought? But I am looking forward to seeing how the additional money's been spent, the 2 million that's been put into the flood prevention and the gully cleansing, etc., and the plans that are underfoot and the way they've all been mapped. Hopefully, the new software that's been undertaken and how that's all bedding in by then. I'm sure that Ed will come along for that. I'm not sure anybody else needs to be there, but that should be an interesting topic, and I'm sure a lot of our residents will be interested in that. Turn your mic on, would you, Dave?
Sorry. Would it be possible to have a lensman come to that as well, purely to get a parish perspective on that kind of topic? I don't know, just a thought.
I don't see why not. If there's a particular lensman you wanted to suggest, and who could give, who maybe works across several parishes or something, who could provide feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, offline, if people could email Daniel with names of potential lensmen. I think somebody that works cross parishes would probably be useful, and copy me in. Then we can look at inviting them to that meeting as well, and give officers a heads up that they'll be there. I think that will be of value. That could give us a dual perspective on how things are working. That's very valuable. Thank you. Next page, please. And then, okay, so we look onto September now, and we are looking at various topics and objectives, including the Hereford City Master Plan, UK SPF, broadband. Yep, thanks, Daniel.
A confession, the first two items in the 9th of September meeting have effectively been dumped there. These were topics that were due to be considered by the committee earlier in the year, but they're just simply not ready yet. The officers have come to us and said, we have nothing for you to scrutinise. So obviously I have a report to meet, and I didn't want to lose these two items because once they go off the work programme, they vanish from people's consciousnesses. So I've put them here at the moment where they can be safely not worked on at the moment, but nonetheless, that's a very crowded meeting for September. That's far too crowded for September. So I suggest that you focus on this in your April work programme and ask yourselves how and when you want to look at these items.
That's good. If we could also possibly have some feedback from officers as to whether they would have reports ready by September or by the end of the year, that could also help us with our work programme. If members are happy, I'm happy to propose this as the work programme through to the end of September. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cornthwaite, all those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you. The date of our next meeting is Tuesday, the 13th of May, 2025, at 2 o'clock. We've got an afternoon. You can have a lie-in, councillors.
To Wednesday.
Yeah, I know. Thank you all very much today. I'm happy to declare today's meeting closed. Thank you for your time.